Okay, we are having just one teeny little technical difficulty. Let's see here. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on our LinkedIn Live. And I am more than thrilled to introduce all of you to Xenia Ambatsoglu. She is the co-founder of 1988, a brand that is built on a movement to empower women to own their stories, their businesses, and their futures. She has a background in corporate leadership and a passion for breaking barriers. She turned a pivotal moment in history into a powerful statement, one that lives on through every piece of night that 1988 creates. I'm wearing a piece from 1988, which I love, and you're going to get some info on here. You can snag that too. Today, she's here to share how 1988 is more than just apparel, though. It's a reminder, a revolution, and a call to action for women and all of those who support women everywhere. So welcome, Xenia. I'm so happy to be talking to you today. And before we take a deeper dive into 1988, I want to start off by asking you, what does the phrase "talk and be you" mean to you?
Well, Julie, thank you for having me and having me share my story. So the first thing that comes to mind for me would be authenticity, which we'll probably hear more about as I tell my story. But being unapologetically yourself and telling your story without worrying about judgment or what people are thinking, really having the confidence to tell your story on your terms. Because what I've learned very recently is you never know who's listening and who you're going to impact.
You know, I love that. I love the authenticity thing. We know that. We know that about each other. So I love what you said there. That's terrific. And your brand is 100% all about authenticity. So can we kind of take that as a jumping off point then to tell us a little bit about your founder story, kind of what brought you into, what's your why for creating 1988? Give us the scoop.
Absolutely. My favorite story.
Great.
Let's start with, because I know everyone is bursting at the seams to find out why 1988, right?
Yes.
1988 was a pivotal moment in time for women in business. In October of 1988, the Women's Business Ownership Act was enacted that allowed women to get business credit and business lending without a male co-signer.
Wow, let's let that land for a second.
Right.
In 1988.
1988.
So what's the math on that? How many years ago was that?
37 years. So needless to say that was something that I couldn't get out of my head after reading that, knowing that within my lifetime, I could have potentially not been able to fund my business because I was a woman is truly impactful. So to share a little further background on where this came from, I spent almost 20 years in financial services, corporate leadership, and quite suddenly was not doing that anymore, not by my own choice. But most recently in my career, I was working on an advocacy program for women in business. And that's where some of my research came from. And that's where 1988 came from. And I realized after losing my position and trying to figure out what to do next, I kept thinking about 1988. It kept popping up in my head. I just couldn't understand how that was so recent. And the burst of inspiration, I guess, came because I couldn't even tell you how it all rolled together. And 1988 was born. I knew I had to tell the story, and I got the opportunity. I'm getting the opportunity to do it my way,
I love
authentically
it.
my way. Um,
Terrific.
so through the apparel, telling the story, sharing how far we've come, but how much further we need to go.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. One of the things that you and I have talked about that I think is really unique about what you're doing as a woman-owned business and as a small business owner, but particularly the female part of that is you are really walking the walk with 1988. You're not just saying we're a women-owned brand, we support women, so on and so on. You are doing it from start to finish. So take us through all the steps that you have intentionally made a part of your business that are why you're really walking the walk.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate you bringing that up. Obviously, this being near and dear to me, I knew that uh, everything had to align. I spent months searching for vendors here in the US that produce the merchandise. It's primarily t-shirts and sweatshirts currently, but I knew that it had to be US made. That was crucial. So we got that piece out of the way. And I'm even more excited to say, as I was searching for a partner in a printer, I found a local woman-owned business who's literally 10 minutes away from me. Uh, and she is currently my printer for all the designs and the artwork. Uh, Super excited to share that. That was, I mean, I was beaming. She didn't understand why, but for me, it meant so much to be supporting another woman-owned business and local at that, and being able to tell that story. And in addition to that, packaging was important to me, trying to stay sustainable with everything flying back and forth nowadays. I was looking for sustainable packaging, and I'm happy to say my wonderful network gave me a recommendation, and I do use packaging that is sustainable, made in the US, and a woman-owned business.
I love all of that. It's a real testament, Xenia, to your commitment to not just the time of 1988 and kind of what happened there, but really being very intentional about every step of the way. So tell me a little bit then about, so I'm gonna sport this t-shirt again because I love this example, but it says 1988 on it. And it's this very cool collage, one of your t-shirts that you offer. Tell me a little bit about that collage, and people can see a teeny bit of it, but you can see a lot more on your website.
Absolutely.
And get into kind of how you, now a little bit of the designer in you and the artist in you, how you brought that into things. Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I would say I have a bit of an eclectic background. I grew up being very artistic, and it faded somehow. It just got into other interests. I was very much an introvert growing up. So my sketch pad was my best friend for a long time. Yeah. Um, I wanted to be an architect, and got into high school. Things changed a little bit, and I got into theater. So it's probably where the introvert shifted a little bit. Um, but always the artistic side. But I did always have a math brain as well. And that's where I landed in financial services. So there was an artsy part of me. And just to fast forward a little bit, I decided later in life to pursue a master's degree, but I didn't want a traditional MBA. And I found this great program, and people hear Parsons and they think design. I actually have a master's degree in design thinking, which is more about designing business, solving business problems from the user's perspective. That's the easiest way to streamline it, I guess. I guess I did go to Parsons, so there's a lot of pieces to all of this that came together. And I've always been told, I take it for granted, but I've always been told I'm very fashionable. Things get put together very well. It's just, that's my own self-expression on a day-to-day. I brought that all together and just started playing around with designs. I started with the logo, and then I thought the collage was a really cool idea. There was a preset image that was my initial template. And then I said, well, that doesn't make sense. It needs to have a purpose. It needs to be intentional. And I began to pull images together to create what you're wearing now.
Very cool. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe 2 or 3 of the images that if someone said, what's on that t-shirt? Like, what are the 2 or 3 that would pop into mind for you to kind of get us thinking about what came together for us?
There are some historical figures. We had to be careful with licensing and things like that. So sure. A lot of it is a little more general. You do see a number of pieces that say girl power, and the future is female, I know, is on there. And of course, images of a variety of women doing different activities and show little girls with their, power stances, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. I love it. And I'm excited to take it on the road and wherever I go, because I love wearing t-shirts under blazers. It's kind of a thing with my brand. So This is another thing to show off and support you and the fabulous things you do. So Xenia, I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who tell me a little bit about a challenge that you faced, or maybe you're facing now, with pulling this together. That's the first thing I want to ask you. And then secondly, I want you to talk a little bit more about how you have pooled your skills up to this point into creating this business, because there's a lot in there too.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Where do you start? I mean, I feel like there's a hurdle around every corner. I made mistakes immediately. I'll tell you one. As I started to look for vendors and printers, naturally you default to Google online. Excuse me. And I started going through the list. One of my initial conversations, I thought everything was fine. They had a local address. It was a scam. Nothing happened, of course, because I wasn't just gonna send a check or pay anything out. And that was the strange thing too. It was a learning for me, because I was wondering what they were doing. And then I went on to the Better Business Bureau and realized they were taking people's money and just not fulfilling orders. The whole entire business was a scam. And immediately I was like, oh my God, are they going to steal my designs, my art? What are they trying to do? And I said, you know what? Just take a step back. It's not that serious. I don't think they have time for that. They're really just trying to make the quick buck off of, unfortunately, the unknowing individual. So that was a big one for me. And that's where I decided to go local, because I was like, I need to see a person.
Yeah. And that's terrific. Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry that happened to you, but
right.
Absolutely. You went with someone who you could have a conversation with.
Yeah. And it obviously worked out quite well. But I feel like every day there's something. It's like, oh no, now what? And I would say that, I've heard this over and over again in probably the last few months. The people that succeed, they don't succeed because they're better than you. They succeed because they keep going.
100% behind that. And that you have to lean on the people around you who support you, who believe in you in a very practical. I mean, you obviously can't just believe in the dream. You have to be very pragmatic, which I know that you are. But having those support systems around you, when you do get up in the morning and you think, oh, I've got my whole day planned out, And then you have this moment of, why am I doing this? There's got to be an easier way, right?
All the time.
Exactly. So, excuse me, I've got spring is in the air here and
Yeah.
the stuff is popping here. So, tell me a little bit more about, you mentioned it earlier, but tell me a little bit more about how you have pooled, combined, brought together your past work, your experiences, and your expertise in creating 1988.
Absolutely. I have an extensive background in consulting businesses. Uh, Therefore, that piece I think came a little easier for me. But again, we always have the challenges. Um, the planning part is something I'm meticulous with. Obviously, the numbers I'm very good at. I wear all hats, obviously. So, what I had to learn in the last 6 months or so was social media, utilizing AI better, um, leveraging resources. I have, you included, an extensive community, and we've got to be willing to just ask for help when we need it and understand where our gaps are. There's no
Mm.
reason to sit here and say, I've got this, I can do this, and you don't. And then it doesn't get done right. And all of your other hard work falls to the wayside because you've worried about the one thing that you can't do right and you can't ask for help for. So
Mhm.
it was a balance of my business background. That part was not so hard. It was I guess, the digital creative part that was new for me. And I'm learning every day, learning how to master digital marketing. I don't know about the master part, but I'm learning to work with it, create engaging content for those that want to uh, experience it. The majority of our platform focus is on Instagram just because of the visual. Um, I am focused on sharing resources as well through that for women-owned businesses, and every day is a learning every day.
What is your favorite part of being an entrepreneur?
Oh, so many things. I have definitely learned that, or I definitely understand now what everyone says when they say, if you do what you love, what is the saying? If you do what you, if you love
There's
what
probably
you
a few there.
do, yeah, if
Yeah,
you love what you do what you love. Anyway, it's not work.
there you go.
That's the bottom line. It's not
Right.
work. Um,
On
and
the
I and I can see that. I mean, even through the hard moments, it's just so much fun because it engages every part of me that I get excited about, problem solving, creative side. Um, I do like numbers. That's why I did it for such a long time. So the numbers, understanding that, learning new things. I am a learner by nature. So the fact that I do, as much as I might have griped about it a little bit earlier, but I love learning new things. Uh, so this allows me to do that. And again, it's all on my terms. So that's what makes this such a phenomenal experience.
I love that. And I wanted to share with you that Purity Ashko put in the comments here. She said, I love that you share that. This was earlier when you were talking about authenticity, but it goes along with what you were saying right
Mhm.
now, because I shared my story today in a forum and 3 other women came forward to share as well. There's a power in sharing our stories with authenticity.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
absolutely. And this is something that as women, we are a bit more, it's kind of this tightrope that we walk sometimes where we're a bit more willing to share that, but we also recognize the vulnerability and the risk of sharing that. And I love that, Purity, that you commented on that, and Xenia, that you understand that. This is being an entrepreneur, being a solopreneur, being a motherpreneur, mompreneur. Those are all very challenging things. And we make ourselves immediately vulnerable, meaning open, sharing ourselves and pouring ourselves into our businesses and having the support of other women and those who support women, because I know I have men in my life who are nothing but supportive, who I couldn't be doing this without. It's a tricky thing. How do you walk that line? Do you ever feel that sort of tension of how much do I share? What do I share?
Absolutely. In a conversation yesterday, that came up, especially around social media. I've gotten a lot of advice that people need to connect with an individual, that I need to be the face of the brand. And I've initially made a conscious choice not to do that up front. I wanted it to be about the brand. But I realized that, yes, we want that personal connection. And so many shared with me, the story coming from you just makes a different impact. So I'm learning as we speak to walk that fine line and share the story, but figure out how to continue to keep it about the brand, because it is the story about the brand and about all of us, all the women entrepreneurs that are out there, and all women in general, just to have that option for yourself. So we're learning about that tightrope walk.
Every step of the way.
Yes.
All right. Can you talk a little bit about how do people go about finding you beyond here on LinkedIn? But where can people find your website, and what's the process like about purchasing this fabulous material and materials? There you go. And you've got a few terrific selections on there. Talk a little bit about that and how that works, and give us a scoop there.
Absolutely. So you can find the merchandise on www.womenowned88.com.
Okay.
And you can see a little bit more about us on Instagram at womenowned88.
Fabulous. And how does the shipping work? How does purchasing work? Is it pretty easy to do? Talk us through a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Very streamlined process on the website. Right now, we have stock of most of our items, so they will tend to ship within a day or so. And I've seen people get product as soon as next day.
Fabulous. I think also, I'll chime in here with that it's springtime. And for some of us who might know or have in our own family any graduates.
Yes.
Coming up in the spring. Those of us who are not graduating this year and who didn't graduate in 1988, but who are totally behind the brand. I think it's a fabulous graduation gift, and I will be
great suggestion.
Indulging. There you go. There we go. Helping people with that, because it tells a story. That's what's so cool about this. What's funny is when you first shared this with me, the first question everybody asks is,
what's 1988? Absolutely.
Exactly.
And that's the thought process behind it. So I will say, go out and get your shirt with a disclaimer. Be ready to have a conversation. Yes. Be ready to engage in a conversation, because someone is going to ask you, what is 1988? And I share within my packaging a nice little card that will give you the story to be able to share with everyone. But take the opportunity to wear the shirt, walk into the room, tell the story about 1988, and then share your story as well.
I love that. I love that. A t-shirt that starts a conversation.
Yeah.
We need a little bit more of that.
Absolutely.
We do. I have a little bit more about that now. When we get off this call, I'm going to take a trip into town to run some errands, and I can't wait to have a conversation about it. So
Yeah,
thank
let
you
me
for
know.
that. That's a double bonus.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to wrap up here. Unless anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or in the comments, and I'll get those to Xenia. We have about a little less than 5 minutes left. And while we wait to see if anything comes in, Xenia, is there anything else you want to talk about or say, or something that maybe we didn't get to?
I would say, again, my big thing around this is we're telling the story because they say you don't know where you're going until you know where you came from, right? So knowing our history and telling that story and continuing that legacy will help us progress further. And as I mentioned, being a little bit of a numbers geek, I will share currently for approximately 42% of small businesses are owned by women. So let's consider that when we say 1988 was the first year that a woman could really get business credit without a male co-signer. And now we make up 42% of small business ownership. And yet only 2% of venture capitalism goes to women. So anyone out there considering venture capitalism, if you are a woman, get in there, help us out. We need more of that. We need to be in spaces where we can help one another. It's crucial. We are not taking advantage of the resources that are out there. Part of it is because we don't ask, so we don't know. And the other piece is because there are still hurdles, and there are still people that think that we maybe just don't do it as well as a man.
Well, we're proving them wrong right here, right? Yes,
that's right. Absolutely.
And thank you for that very clear data point. That's a very real thing. That 2% number is, we need to be having more of that conversation. So we're working on it.
Yes.
And Xenia, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so insightful, really enlightening. And go check out Women-Owned 88.com. There we go.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks for helping me share the story.
My 100% pleasure. Take care.